The British Empire almost lost an entire war because one man demanded to sit on a piece of furniture. This is the Golden Stool of Asante, a throne so sacred that in over 300 years, not even a king or queen has ever been allowed to sit on it. Not once. Legend says it fell from the heavens and landed in a king's lap, carrying the literal soul of the Asante nation inside it. It wasn't just gold, it was their identity. But in 1900, a British governor named Sir Frederick Hodgson decided he didn't believe in legends. He stood before the Asante court and demanded they hand it over so he could sit on it himself. In that moment, time stopped. Men who had knelt before that stool their entire lives stood in a silence so heavy it felt like a declaration of war. Then, without a word, they went home and started sharpening their blades. By the end of this video, you'll understand why a single stool was worth more than a nation's independence, and the incredible mystery of how it vanished for 20 years, only to reappear in the most dangerous hands possible. This is the War of the Golden Stool. Late 1600s. West Africa was carved into small competing kingdoms, each one loyal only to itself, each with its own throne, its own gods, its own long list of grudges against the kingdom next door. Weaker states paid tribute just to survive the year. Nobody questioned it. It had always worked this way. One ruler, Osei Tutu, wanted something different. Beside him stood a priest named Okomfo Anokie, who believed fear could hold a kingdom together for a while, but not forever. What they were about to do next would either unite an entire people or get them both killed trying. Rival chiefs, one room, every single one of them certain of his own authority. None of them prepared for what came next. Anokie raised his hands to the sky, and, according to the account passed down since, the sky answered. Gold, drifting down, settling onto Osei Tutu's lap in full view of every chief present. It wasn't a gift. Anokie made that clear immediately. What had just arrived belonged to no one individually. Then the ceremony took a stranger turn. Hair and fingernail clippings, gathered from every chief in that clearing, buried beneath the gold. For each man kneeling there, that was no small thing to hand over. A physical piece of himself, buried where he'd never get it back. Historians still argue over what actually happened that day, and probably always will. Some call it myth-making. Others think the ritual was staged deliberately, theater with a purpose. Either way, kingdoms that had fought each other for generations stopped being separate that afternoon. And that decision was about to be tested sooner than anyone expected. The most powerful man in the land, handed a golden throne, you'd expect him to claim it, ruled from it. Nobody has, not once, in 300 years. The Asantehene commanded the army, set the taxes, shaped the empire's direction, but that stool sat permanently outside his reach. He didn't own it. He answered to it. Break the trust that came with the crown, and he could be removed. Not by force, by ceremony, in front of the same council that had put him there. The stool didn't move, he did. This wasn't theory, it happened. More than once, an Asantehene lost his title this way. Strip away the ritual and gold, and what's left is a functioning check on a ruler's power, a way to remove a king without a knife or a civil war. That's the kind of mechanism most people assume got invented somewhere else, centuries later, and written down in a different language. No founding document, no parchment, no ink. Even so, this operated as a functioning legal system. Chiefs from every region sat on a council bound by oath to the stool itself. Taxes were standardized. The military answered to one command. A ruling in the capital carried the same weight 100 miles into the countryside. Written law depends on enforcement. This system asked for something harder to escape, the belief that breaking the rule meant damaging something sacred. It held for 200 years. And then gold started pouring in, and everything got more complicated. Asante grew fast. New territory, gold moving through Kumasi by the fortune, old rivals absorbed one after another into its borders. Growth brought exactly the strain you'd expect. Succession disputes sharp enough to split the empire overnight. Tributary states testing exactly how much loyalty they actually owed. Every time, leadership reached for the stool before reaching for the sword. It worked, right up until the moment someone showed up who didn't believe in it at all. By 1900, that someone had arrived. Hodgson, governor of the Gold Coast, stood before the Asante court and asked to sit on the stool, as proof in his mind that the British crown now outranked whatever Asante had spent 3 centuries building. To him it was gold and carved wood, striking, valuable, replaceable. He had no framework for what he was actually looking at, and no idea that the gap between those two things was about to cost him a war. To the room, he just asked to erase a nation's soul and take its seat. What came next would be remembered as a war fought over a single unmoving throne. The chiefs hesitated. Men who had led armies without flinching stood frozen, weighing a fight none of them were sure they could win. Yaa Asantewaa, the Queen Mother, stood instead. "If you, the men of Asante, will not go forward," she said, "then we, the women, will." They fought. They lost. By 1902, Asante had been folded into the British Empire, independence gone, at least on paper. But the stool was never found. Hidden long before any soldier came close enough to reach it. Britain got the land, the treaties, the flag over Kumasi. It never got the one object it started the war to obtain. Yaa Asantewaa herself didn't get to see any of that outcome. She was captured, exiled to the Seychelles, thousands of miles from Kumasi, and died there, still in exile, having never gone home. The stool she'd fought to protect outlasted her. Or so everyone believed, until 19 years later, when it found its way back into the wrong hands. 1920, road workers, laying track, stumble onto something buried in the dirt. They had no idea what they'd found. They stripped it of its gold ornaments, not out of malice, just ignorance of what they were looking at. When Asante leaders found out, the reaction was immediate and severe. A traditional court sentenced the men to death for the desecration. That's how seriously the offense was taken, even 20 years after a war had already been fought over this exact object. The British, watching this unfold, intervened. The sentence was commuted to permanent exile instead. And in the aftermath, the colonial government did something it had never done before. It gave a formal assurance that it would never interfere with the stool again. The empire that once tried to sit on this throne by force had just admitted in writing that it couldn't. That same stool sits in Kumasi today. Chiefs are still installed under its authority. Kings are still bound by rules nobody ever filed anywhere official. We tend to assume constitutions need paper to survive. A vault, a government standing guard over the document. This one had neither. It had people willing to keep believing in it. Through a war, through exile, through desecration, through a century of a colonial government that fully understood by the end that some things can't be seized. Some nations carved their laws into stone. This one asked people to remember them instead. And for 300 years running into the next century, they still do.